Greetings all, and welcome to part 7 of my series on the Gundam franchise and the works of Yoshiki Tomino, in which I shall review Tomino's 6th work as writer and director, Ora Battler Dunbine. Now, as I mentioned in previous installments of this series, Mobile Suit Gundam was not really successful upon its initial airing. In fact, I did some additional research, I guess if you could call reading Gundam Sosei research. I mean, you have to kind of discern the fact from the fiction, but at any rate, there was actually a long period of time in which the original Mobile Suit Gundam didn't even break the 5% rating, this 5% rating, and apparently even one of the episodes got literally a 0%. I find that completely mind-boggling, seeing as we consider a poorly rated show over here something that only receives, like, 30% or something, 25% or something around those lines. But yeah, Gundam received there was a period of time which Gundam couldn't even break a 5% rating, and I'm surprised the show even managed to run for 43 episodes, because they initially considered canceling at 26, but that's neither here nor there. But as I mentioned before, following the creation of the television series Space Runway Eon, Yoshiki Tomino decided to make 3 compilation films of the Gundam trilogy, and as I mentioned in my review / analysis of it, he changed a few things that he wasn't quite comfortable with, and those started to generate quite a bit of interest. So after he formally finished his Ideon saga with a compilation film of its own and another film which served as a more complete ending to the television series, he decided to try and make the television series that he made from there on out a little bit more like Gundam. Suffice it to say that it would be 3 years yet until he actually returned to the Gundam franchise to make its long-awaited sequel. But in 1982, he made another Real Robot series called Combat Mecha Zabungle. Now, as I mentioned in previous installments, this was also this was a significantly lighter work than a lot of what Tomino did before. It's basically kind of a desert, slash cyber something. It's kind of like Mad Max, except I'm not sure if it's post-apocalypse. I didn't really research that. But basically, what I do know about the series is that it doesn't really take itself at all seriously, and it probably has some of the most prominent comedic elements of any of Tomino's works to date, which is why I was a little excited to watch it until I found out that there weren't subtitles of it, because I kind of wanted a break from his more serious dramatic work, because I think it was starting to affect my mood a little, but But suffice it to say, there hasn't been an official English language release of it. The only fan subbers didn't finish it, so I had to skip it. To go to his next work, Ora Battler Dunbine, which out of the 3 shows that he made after Ideon and prior to Zeta Gundam, this is probably the closest to Gundam itself, except there is one significant twist in the formula there. Instead of being a military science fiction, it's a kind of a military fantasy title, if you could call it that. Though suffice it to say, it's definitely more than meets the eye. And for all intents and purposes, it probably has one of the more original concepts of its time. This show was started airing in 1983, which the significance of that I will get into once I start talking about the technical aspects of the series. But the show's premise uh, a wealthy a son of wealthy parents by the name of living in Tokyo by the name of Sho Zama, has aspirations of being a motocross rider, and at the beginning of the series he tries to show up some of his friends who have doubts about his abilities by successfully leaping over a car in front of him. Suffice it to say, they were impressed, but not quite for the reasons that he anticipated, because after he leaps into the air, he disappears. And after seeing imagery that he couldn't possibly explain immediately, he wakes up in the world of Byston Well, in the castle of Drake Luft. He later finds out that he and two other people were called from upper Earth, which is the Earth that we reside on, to pilot pilot mechs called humanoid mechs called aura battlers, which are fueled by the aura energy of their pilots, and the most reliably high aura resonances come from people from Upper Earth. So they used a creature that they captured called a Silky to call them down from there. As it turns out, when Sho is fighting a resistance group led by one of the houses against the House of Luft, the Neil Given, he finds out that Drake Luft actually has ambitions to take over all of Byston Well, and eventually he decides to come over to their side after a series of events, and with the Aura Battler Dunbine, which, as it turns out, because he's the protagonist of the show, he has an incredible skill in piloting. So thus begins the Resistance's battle against Drake Luft. And yeah, as far as the technical aspects go, I mentioned the show's Super Dimension Fortress Macross quite a few times before in this retrospective, and it was for a very good reason. The show, released in 1982, more or less redefined how anime for television was produced, created, animated, basically because it was tremendously successful and also rather well animated for its time, and its legacy definitely shows in Dunbine as well, which for all intents and purposes is Tomino's was almost certainly Tomino's best animated work for television up to that point. Nobody, for all intents and purposes, nobody would confuse the style for something made in the mid-90s or something like that. But there's the sheer vividness, fluidity, and detail that was put in the animation, and certainly in comparison to his previous works, holds up a lot better, suffice it to say, and it can almost compete with quite a few shows today, or quite a few shows released today. And another significantly interesting visual aspect of the show is its artistic design, which is also a little different than Tomino shows up to that point. The Aura Battlers look almost, the Aura Battlers and various spaceships look at times rather steampunkish, and at times rather almost insectoid or biological, and the character designs as well look demonstrate a lot more Western influences than Yoshihiko's work for Gundam, or the other character designers work for Ideon and Zabungle, I forget his name, but suffice it to say, it was also a very distinctively looking show as well, and a very and a very pretty one at that. You know, again, almost certainly by the standards of the early '80s. So yeah, as far as the animation goes, I have actually have very little complaints this time. And the music is also probably the you know, probably the best in any of Tomio's works up to that point. You know, just because it's probably the most carefully crafted orchestral score, and you know, suffice to say, seeing as it is a television series, quite a few pieces are repeated. But again, as is usually the case with music in Tomino series, it is used very well. Very well. It communicates precisely the emotion that it needs to within that specific scene. And for that alone, I think it's rather successful in that respect. Okay, right. So I mentioned before that the series is an amalgamation of real robot-esque elements. You know, seeing as, of course, you know, aura, and you know, the aura battlers are powered by aura energy. How real is that? But you know, for all intents and purposes, aside from basically, the show is intriguing in that it's about as realistic as a fantasy work that's you know, very realistically portrayed fantasy work, if that makes any sense. You know, which is typically the case for Yoshiki Tomio's works. In some ways, they were deconstructions of previously established formulas. And this causes Byston Well to be perhaps one of the single most fascinating fantasy worlds that I have ever seen outside of like a Miyazaki film or something. Yeah, without spoiling anything, because again, it starts in medias res for a very specific reason. They want to try and keep about as much of how the world actually works a secret, you know, up to a certain point, and they gradually reveal information as the series goes on. But you know, basically, the more I heard about the series world, the more I actually wanted to find out about it. So basically, it's, you know, it's very original for quite a few reasons, namely kind of its connections regarding mortality and also how, you know, this is not really a spoiler because it's real at the beginning of the series, but how the upper world actually interacts with Byston Well. It is probably one of the mythology's most fascinating aspects, because you know, for all intents and purposes, unlike a lot of other you know, Alice in Wonderland, you know, young person down the rabbit hole sort of fantasy stories, where the fantasy world is far removed from the world in which the you know, normal person, as it were, inhabits. In this case, they are very, you know, though they aren't intended to be connected, their connection starts to cause very very dire consequences for both realms. Like, for instance, yeah, the reason why the aura battlers exist within Byston Well in the first place is because of an engineer, well, not really an engineer, a person. You know, it's not really defined what their profession was in Upper Earth, but a person by the name of Shot Weapon from Upper Earth actually came down and constructed some of the basics of design and design of the Dunbines, and as a result, in Byston Well you also see weapons like you know, modern-looking pistols and machine guns being used, and as I mentioned before, airships. But there's a very specific reason why all these technological advances came about, was basically because of a forbidden connection, if you will, between Well and Upper Earth, and this, as is to be expected, causes Drake Luft to have a significant technological advantage over pretty much all the surrounding areas. Though thankfully, it's not complete. It's not a complete curb stomp battle every time, because the surrounding areas are also starting to pick up his technology as well in an attempt to counter it. But that's basically, Drake Luft's kind of motivation for, starting his imperial expansion in the first place. But suffice to say, the character, suffice to say, the world is, fascinatingly original. The characterization is also, right up to Tomino standards, and in fact there are, quite a few rather surprising moments that actually, once you think about them, were supplemented by character development that was given before. So and in addition, I feel it necessary to mention that the series pacing as well is also quite excellent. Actually, there's not really one episode, even in the later portion, which many people consider to be not quite as good as the earlier episodes. It's quite as good as the first half, but I'd kind of beg to differ. But suffice it to say, the pacing in the show, is also very good, despite the fact that there's, approximately a battle every episode. They make sure to get a lot of story in each episode at the same time, so it never really feels like nothing is moving. So it doesn't really feel like nothing is moving forward. For the most part, there are a few exceptions, toward the end of the series, but for all intents and purposes, the show never really lost my interest. There's a lot of characterization, a lot of story going on, and for all intents and purposes, it is on a grand. It does take place on a grand epic scale. There's a lot of characters, and Tomino makes sure to give each one of them their due attention. Basically, whenever I kept thinking, what's happening to one specific character, that he actually, it seems like a few scenes later they actually cut to that character, and that's some very good attention to, it's a very comprehensive and well done storytelling, actually. So suffice it to say, when all's said and done, this is, Dunbine is vintage Tomino. It has a very, very unique concept, done very well, setting in a fantasy world as well also gives Tomino some creative free reign to try a myriad of new things. Quite a few of them actually influenced some of his later works, actually, like Zeta Gundam. Again, I can't really spoil that much as to how it does, but if anybody has actually watched Zeta Gundam before going into it, they'll almost certainly know what I'm talking about. And hell, I might even go into some of it in the analysis, but suffice it to say, I give the show a rather high recommendation, especially for fans of Tomino and fans of fantasy, because for fantasy fans, this is a world, a complex and intriguing world that you can't really miss out on. And for Gundam fans, as I said before, it's basically a Gundam show in a fantasy setting. So, and it delivers on almost every respect that you would expect a Gundam title in a fantasy setting to deliver on. So, yeah, yeah. My next video on it is probably going to be a further analysis of Oribel or Dunbine. You know, just some additional, so a lot of additional comments that I couldn't put in this review just for risk of spoilers. But so yeah, stay tuned for that. If watch watch the series first if you want to. I don't really mind spoilers much myself, but yeah, but yeah, stay tuned for that.